Mildrid the Mouse's Halloween Adventure. In the quiet shadows of an old forgotten manor, a little black mouse, Mildrid was her name, walked silently. Candlestick in her hand, she strolled delicately from room to room, peering around. Except for the bats in the attic, Mildrid was the only resident of the manor. The silence she had grown to expect had been broken, so she took it upon herself to investigate the source of the noise. She heard it again, this time even louder than before. It seemed to be coming from the entrance hall. Walking swiftly across tattered old rugs, Mildrid made her way down the long hallway. Spiderwebs quivered on the ceiling above from the wind that slipped through the old windows. Her candle flickered slightly. There it was again, the mysterious sound. The entrance hall was just around the corner. Mildrid placed one paw on the wall and slowly peered around. A dark figure stood in the middle of the hall. What was it doing? Mildrid wondered. And just as she was about to get a closer look at the figure, a blinding flash illuminated the room. Mildrid dropped her candle onto the floor as she covered her eyes. She opened her eyes slowly and glanced to where the figure stood. The figure had vanished. She bent down to pick up her candle. It had gone out. She stood still and listened. Silence. This was too strange, she thought. Making her way quickly but carefully back down the hall, she ran back to her room. Mildrid slipped through a small hole she had made at the bottom of an old wooden door. Missing patches of plaster decorated the ceiling around a dull and dusty crystal chandelier. Screwing up an old quilt that ran down the side of the bed, she rested on the soft material, full of wonder, full of curiosity, full of mystery. What was that figure she saw? What was that bright flash of light? A gust of wind whistled eerily through the old windows. Mildrid sunk further into the soft bedding to warm up. Whatever it was gone now, she thought. With that, the excitement and thrill of the night began to weigh heavier on her eyelids until she fell fast asleep. Bright pumpkin orange morning sunlight filled her bedroom, casting wavy lines on the wall from the old glass windows it shone through. A little spider worked busily building a small web on the window. How fitting, Mildrid thought, for today was Halloween. She had a quick bite to eat, then went outside for a walk. The sun beamed cheerfully, illuminating the autumn colors that still clung to the trees above. Orange, red, and yellow hues painted the world around her. She made a little pile of leaves, and with excitement, jumped right into it. The leaf pile was almost as tall as she was, so only her little head poked out the top. The day went by quickly, the setting sun sinking fast into the trees. There was one last thing she wanted to do before she went inside for the night. Something she did every Halloween. She had to find the perfect fall leaf to press and keep. So many different trees surrounded her, but this year she decided she wanted to collect an oak leaf. Crunching over the fallen leaves, she scurried over to a large old tree and hunted for just the right one. She picked up a leaf. No, this wasn't good. It was missing a piece. The next one wasn't quite right either. It was still fairly green. Leaf by leaf she picked up until a vibrantly colored red leaf was uncovered. Mildrid gently lifted it up into the sunlight to inspect it. Perfect! It was absolutely perfect. With happiness in her heart and glee in her soul, she ran back through the trees to her home. The sun was setting faster now. She squeezed through the tiny crack at the bottom of the front door, pulling the leaf through carefully. Down the hallway she scampered until she reached a doorway. Large wooden shelves covered the walls inside, filled with hundreds of books. Mildrid loved this room. She loved the smell of the old book pages and enjoyed looking in some of them, as a few were full of interesting drawings and illustrations. On a large desk, next to an old oil lamp, rested a dusty book with a golden design on the cover. Mildred lifted the cover and flipped a few of the pages, passing dried fall leaves from past Halloweens. Pressing leaves on Halloween was a tradition in her family. She enjoyed looking at the leaves her grandmother and others before her had pressed. With a smile, she found a blank spot in the book, carefully set down her perfect leaf, and closed it. Her paw rested delicately on the book cover as she found herself lost in nostalgia for a moment. The floor creaked behind her. Mildred turned around quickly, and just as she did, she caught a glimpse of dull white, tattered fabric whisk past in the hall. Swiftly, she jumped down from the desk and ran to the doorway. Peering out into the hall, she couldn't believe her eyes. The fabric she had seen was only part of a larger being that glided down the hall. It was a ghost. The fabric fell from it in torn pieces, swaying and shivering in the cool air as the being floated down the hall, turning left and right as it went, as if it were looking for something. Mildred dashed out of sight. Was this the same creature she saw last night, she wondered? The floorboards squeaked in the hall. It was coming back. She pressed herself as tight as she could behind the leg of the desk to keep out of view. The footsteps grew closer. She held her breath. The tattered fabric swept across the floor right next to her. She almost let out a gasp, but caught herself. Suddenly, there was another noise that rang out from the entry hall, and quickly, the being floated out the door toward the source of the noise. Trembling, Mildred stood still for a while and listened. A ruckus of sounds bounced down the hall from the entry. With curiosity, she decided to be brave and see what all the commotion was about. It was nighttime now. Moonlight cast eerie shadows in the hall as she crept slowly toward the source of the noise. Mildred jumped. What was that? She crept slowly again. Her heart skipped a beat. The entry was only a few feet away. Carefully, she reached out and placed her shaking paw onto the corner and looked out into the entry hall. She let out a high-pitched squeak of surprise. The large room was crawling with all sorts of creatures. The ghost hovered over the others, holding onto something odd that must have been 20 foot long that slithered in the air around it. A jack-o'-lantern creature holding a huge spider stood next to a goblin that was busy pulling spiderweb out of a box. High-pitched laughter pierced the air as a woman with a wide-brimmed, pointed black hat entered from outside. Her dress and hat glittered and flashed in the moonlight. It was a witch. Mildred stood still and watched, frozen with both mystery and curiosity. The floorboards creaked and groaned beneath the feet of all the creatures as they worked busily. A bright flash of light burst out into the room. There it was again, the mysterious flash of light, she thought. Mildred squinted into the dark to try and see what it was. A dark figure stood in the far corner of the room. Flash! The light burst out into the cool air again. The dark figure slowly stepped forward into the moonlight to reveal a young woman holding a camera. "You're right, Tara, this place is perfect," said a young man's voice from above. The young woman smiled. "I told you so." So that was where the flash was coming from, Mildred thought. The camera. "I think we're ready," exclaimed the young man's voice. Once down from the ladder, the ghost reached up towards its head and pulled off its mask to reveal the smiling face of a young man. With a loud clack sound, the room illuminated with lights and music. Cheers of delight echoed through the room. huge smile spread across Mildred's face. The ghost wasn't a ghost after all, just a young man in a costume. That 20-foot-something odd slithering above? It was just a paper party streamer. Mildred looked out into the room of festive Halloween decorations and costume people thoughtfully. She laughed a little. What had seemed so scary before wasn't really scary after all. The room was filled with laughter and chatter, games and dancing. Mildred watched for a while, but then decided to join in on all the Halloween fun and scurried out into the crowded room. She squeaked a merry little hello to the witch above her. The witch looked down at Mildred. With a horrified expression, a loud scream rang out from the witch's lips. "Mouse!" With haste, the costume guests raced out of the house in a fearful, frantic flurry of excitement, leaving the manor silent once more. Mildred stood in the center of the empty room. Though the Halloween party ended sooner than she expected, her smile grew even wider, as this had been one of her most exciting Halloweens yet.